quiet hum of the Zephyrian Archive's climate control system provided a soothing white noise as Tessa Corin hunched over her workstation, her eyes strained against the blue glow of her terminal. The only significant source of light in the cavernous hall lined with data cores stretching hundreds of meters in every direction. Around her, a dozen other researchers sat scattered at similar stations, each lost in their own investigations of galactic mysteries. File AP993, Tessa mumbled to herself as her fingers danced across the holographic interface. Access historical imagery, authorization, Corine 7 Delta. The screen flickered, then displayed a series of grainy recordings. The footage, compiled from emergency beacons, ship black boxes, and orbital defense platforms, showed the same horrifying sequence from different angles, a massive shape moving with impossible speed through the void, tearing through capital ships as if they were made of tissue paper. Energy weapons dissipated harmlessly against its hide, armor plating crumpled in its jaws. Tessa had reviewed this footage dozens of times during her research assignment, but it never failed to send a chill down her spine. The Apex Predator, a name coined by the sole survivor of the Regellian fleet's destruction, had claimed thousands of lives during its rampage 2 centuries ago, for nearly a decade. It had terrorized shipping lanes across 3 spiral arms before suddenly vanishing without explanation. Some theorized it had died. Others believed it had entered hibernation or migrated beyond charted space. The archive officially classified the case as dormant threat, resolution undetermined. Until yesterday, Tessa pulled up the latest report. A routine biometric sweep of the frontier worlds had detected an energy signature matching the Predator's unique spectral pattern. The source: a remote settlement on Aurelia Prime, a modest agricultural world in the Outer Rim. "Researcher Corin," a voice called from behind her. Tessa turned to find Chief Archivist Venn approaching, his tall, gaunt figure cutting an imposing silhouette against the dim lighting. His formal gray uniform bore the insignia of the Archival Council, 12 silver stars arranged in a perfect circle. "I've reviewed your preliminary assessment of the Aurelian anomaly," Venn said, his voice as crisp and sterile as the archive itself. "The Council finds your recommendation for in-person investigation unusual." Tessa straightened in her chair. "The biometric signature is a 96% match. Chief Archivist, that's well above our standard threshold for field verification." "Indeed. But given the nature of this particular subject, remote observation would be the established protocol. We could deploy automated probes, With respect," Tessa interrupted. "Automated systems failed to track the Predator the first time. Its ability to disrupt scanning technology was well documented during the Regellian incident." Venn's expression remained neutral, but Tessa noticed a slight tightening around his eyes, the closest thing to emotion the Chief Archivist ever displayed. "And you believe your presence would yield superior results?" he asked. "I've spent 3 years studying the Apex Predator case. I know its behavioral patterns and energy signatures better than our automated systems." Tessa hesitated, then added, "Plus, the signature is emanating from a populated area. If this really is the Predator, we need human judgment to assess the situation without creating panic." The Chief Archivist considered her words for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he gave a barely perceptible nod. "The Council will approve your expedition," he said. "But with conditions. You'll observe only no contact with the subject, no intervention if the situation appears hostile. Your sole objective is verification and documentation." "Understood. Chief Archivist." "And Corin," Venn added as he turned to leave. "While your dedication to this case is commendable, remember that objectivity is the foundation of our work. The Apex Predator is not just another research subject. If confirmed, immediate evacuation protocols will be necessary." After Venn departed, Tessa exhaled slowly. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Getting approval for field research was rare enough, but for a case of this magnitude, almost unprecedented. She returned to her terminal, already compiling the list of equipment she would need. The journey to Aurelia Prime would take nearly a week. Even aboard the Archive's fastest vessel, she would need to prepare thoroughly. As she worked, Tessa couldn't help but glance at the frozen image still displayed on her screen, a blurry capture of the Predator mid-attack, its massive form silhouetted against the burning wreckage of a cruiser. Something about the image had always bothered her, though she couldn't quite articulate what. Perhaps, she thought, seeing the creature in person would finally provide the answers she sought. The preparation process proved even more arduous than Tessa had anticipated. Equipment requisitions required signatures from 3 different departments. Her transport needed special clearance due to the classified nature of her mission. Even her field rations had to be specially approved to ensure they contained no scents that might attract predatory attention. 5 days of bureaucratic battles later, Tessa finally stood in the Archive's hangar bay, watching as the last of her equipment was loaded onto the sleek research vessel designated for her journey. The ship, a Cygnus-class scout named Empirical, was designed for stealth observation, with advanced cloaking systems and sensor arrays capable of gathering data from orbit. "Final systems check complete," announced the ship's AI as Tessa settled into the pilot's chair. "All parameters within optimal range, awaiting departure authorization." "Authorization code Corin 7 Delta Echo," Tessa replied, strapping herself in. "Initiate launch sequence." The hangar doors slid open silently, revealing the star-speckled blackness of space. With barely a whisper from its engines, the Empirical glided forward and out into the void. "Setting course for Aurelia Prime," the AI informed her. "Estimated arrival, 6 standard days, 14 hours. As the ship accelerated to superluminal velocity, Tessa reviewed her mission parameters one final time. Her primary objective was simple: confirm whether the biometric signature belonged to the apex predator. If confirmed, she was to gather observational data from a safe distance, then return immediately to the Archive with her findings. Under no circumstances was she to engage with the creature. The journey passed in a blur of research, preparation, and restless sleep. Tessa spent hours reviewing the historical records, studying every documented encounter with the predator, searching for patterns or insights that might have been missed. She analyzed the environmental conditions of Aurelia Prime, trying to understand what might have drawn the creature to such an unremarkable world. By the time the Empirical dropped out of superluminal travel and entered the Aurelian system, Tessa had memorized every detail of her mission briefing and rehearsed every possible scenario she might encounter. "Initiating stealth approach," the ship's AI announced as they neared the planet. "All external emissions minimized, passive sensors only." Aurelia Prime grew larger in the view screen, a blue-green sphere swirled with white clouds, remarkably Earth-like in appearance. According to the Archive's records, the planet had been colonized nearly 70 years ago by a group seeking a simpler agrarian lifestyle away from the technology-dependent core worlds. Its population numbered fewer than 20,000, spread across small farming communities in the temperate regions. "I've located the source of the biometric signature," the AI reported. "Coordinates locked. It's coming from a settlement designated Havens Valley." Tessa examined the sensor readouts. The signature was unmistakable, the same unique energy pattern documented during the Predator's attacks 2 centuries ago. But there was something odd about it. The pattern seemed more stable, less chaotic than the historical recordings. "Take us into low orbit," she instructed. "I want visual confirmation before we land." The Empirical descended silently, its cloaking systems rendering it invisible to both conventional sight and scanning technology. Through the clouds, the landscape of Aurelia Prime came into view, rolling hills covered in fields of golden grain, patches of forest, and scattered settlements connected by dirt roads rather than transport grids. Havens Valley appeared on the horizon, a collection of perhaps 30 structures arranged around a central square. Most were simple dwellings built from local timber and stone. with a few larger buildings that likely served as community centers or storage facilities. "Magnify Quadrant 4, Tessa ordered, focusing on the outskirts of the settlement. The image zoomed in on a small farmhouse standing alone at the edge of a field. It was a modest 2-story structure with a sloped roof and a wide porch. A barn stood nearby, along with what appeared to be animal pens. And there, unmistakable despite being partially concealed in the shadow of the barn, was a massive shape that matched no known livestock species native to Aurelia Prime. Tessa's heart raced. "That's it. That's our subject." "Confirmed," the AI responded. "Biometric signature at 97.8% match with historical records of the apex predator." For several minutes, Tessa simply stared at the image, trying to reconcile what she was seeing with everything she knew about the creature. The apex predator, scourge of the spiral arms, destroyer of fleets, was apparently living peacefully on a farm. "We need closer observation," she decided. "Prepare for landing at coordinates." She selected a wooded area, approximately 2 kilometers from the farmhouse. "Here, we'll proceed on foot from there." The Empirical touched down in a small clearing, its landing struts adjusting to the uneven terrain, as the ship powered down to minimal life support. Tessa gathered her field equipment, a portable scanner disguised as a common agricultural tool, a remote-operated drone the size of her palm, emergency rations, and a personal shield generator, the last line of defense if the worst should happen. Before disembarking, she checked her appearance in the reflection of a blank screen. She had exchanged her archive uniform for local attire, simple, durable clothing in muted earth tones, designed to blend in with the agrarian population. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and she had removed all jewelry or accessories that might identify her as an off-worlder. "Ship in standby mode," the AI confirmed. "Emergency protocols active. Departure hatch opening." The air that greeted Tessa as she stepped outside was surprisingly sweet, rich with the scents of soil, vegetation, and a hint of wood smoke from distant hearths. After a week in the recycled atmosphere of the Empirical, the freshness was almost intoxicating. She took a moment to orient herself, using the position of Aurelia's sun to confirm her direction. The settlement lay to the east, perhaps an hour's walk through light woodland and fields. As Tessa made her way toward Havens Valley, she activated her scanner, sweeping it in a casual arc that would appear to an observer as nothing more significant than checking the weather. The readings confirmed what the ship's sensors had detected. The Predator's energy signature emanated strongly from the direction of the isolated farmhouse. The outer fields of the settlement came into view as Tessa emerged from the woodland. Workers moved through rows of crops, using simple tools rather than the automated systems common on more developed worlds. No one paid her much attention as she walked along the path leading into the village. Just another traveler passing through. Havens Valley itself proved to be as quaint as it had appeared from orbit. The buildings were well maintained, but deliberately rustic, with hand-carved details and gardens bursting with both decorative and practical plantings. People nodded politely as she passed, but asked no questions. Perhaps visitors were common enough not to warrant special attention. Tessa made her way to what appeared to be the settlement's only public house, a 2-story building with a swinging wooden sign depicting a sheaf of wheat. The establishment would provide both a place to gather information and a plausible reason for her presence. Inside, the Hearth and Harvest Inn was warm and inviting, with rough-hewn wooden tables, a long bar, and a crackling fireplace despite the mild weather outside. A handful of patrons sat enjoying early evening meals or drinks. The innkeeper, a broad-shouldered woman with silver-streaked hair, looked up as Tessa entered. "Welcome, traveler," she called. "What brings you to our valley?" Tessa had prepared for this. "Just passing through," she replied with a smile. "I'm documenting traditional farming methods for the Outer Rim Agricultural Collective. I heard Havens Valley has maintained some of the old ways." It was a cover story designed to explain her interest without raising suspicion, close enough to her actual information-gathering purpose to be maintained convincingly. The innkeeper nodded approvingly. That we have. None of those soil-stripping automated harvesters here. We work with the land, not against it. She gestured to an empty table. Sit yourself down. First meals on the house for travelers. Old custom. Tessa accepted gratefully, recognizing the opportunity to establish herself. As she ate the simple but hearty stew placed before her, she listened to the conversations around her, gathering context about the community. "Third goat this month," one farmer was saying to his companion. "Just gone. No tracks, no blood, nothing." "Same happened to the Taylors last week," his friend replied. "Their prize rooster and 2 hens vanished overnight. Coop wasn't even disturbed." "Strange times," the first man murmured. "Reminds me of the stories my grandmother used to tell about the drift." Tessa's ears perked up at this, but she maintained her casual demeanor, only occasionally glancing up from her meal. "Pardon," she said after a moment, injecting herself into their conversation with an apologetic smile. "I couldn't help overhearing about your missing livestock. I'm documenting farming practices in the region, and predator management is part of my study. Is there a local animal causing problems?" The farmers exchanged glances. "Nothing we've been able to track," the older one said. "Started about a year ago. Small animals disappearing, mostly at night. No signs of struggle." "Most peculiar thing," added his companion, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Is it only happens around the Linton place? That odd girl who lives at the edge of the valley?" "Odd girl?" Tessa prompted, keeping her tone merely curious. "Mara Linton," the innkeeper interjected, having approached with a pitcher to refill drinks. "And she's not odd. Jensen, just private. Moved here. Oh, must be about 2 years ago now. Bought old man Hadley's place after he passed. Keeps to herself. But she's pleasant enough when she comes in for supplies. Lives all alone out there," Jensen insisted. "Never joins community gatherings. And have you noticed, the wild animals never bother her crops. Not even birds touch her fruit trees." The innkeeper rolled her eyes. "Because she knows what she's doing. Some folks could learn from her instead of spreading gossip." She turned to Tessa. "If you're studying farming methods, you might actually want to talk with Mara. She has a way with growing things I've never seen before." This was exactly the opening Tessa needed. "I'd like that. Where can I find her farm?" "Follow the east road out of town about 1/2 kilometer. Can't miss it, only house that far out. Just before the road curves toward the hills. White fence. Big oak tree in the yard." Tessa thanked them for the information and finished her meal, careful not to appear too eager. As twilight approached, she left the inn, ostensibly heading back toward the village center. Once out of sight, she circled around to approach the eastern road. The Linton farmhouse matched the description perfectly. Set back from the road, it presented a charming picture. Whitewashed walls, neatly tended garden, smoke curling from the chimney. Nothing about it suggested it might be harboring one of the most dangerous entities ever encountered by galactic civilization. Tessa positioned herself at the edge of a neighboring field, concealed by a stand of tall grain. From her vantage point, she had a clear view of the farmhouse and its surroundings. She activated her scanner again, confirming that the predator's energy signature was indeed emanating from somewhere on the property, stronger now, indicating the creature was present rather than merely having passed through. As the sun sank toward the horizon, Tessa prepared her observation drone, a marvel of archive technology designed to be virtually undetectable, no larger than a butterfly. It could transmit high-resolution visuals and audio back to her portable receiver while remaining invisible to all but the most advanced detection systems. "Initiate surveillance pattern. Theta," she whispered, releasing the drone. It rose silently, then darted toward the farmhouse, programmed to maintain a safe distance while capturing as much data as possible. Through the drone's feed, Tessa observed a young woman, presumably Mara Linton, moving about the farmhouse. She appeared to be in her mid-20s, with hair the color of wheat and a face that, while not conventionally beautiful, possessed a certain tranquil quality. She moved with purpose, preparing what looked like an evening meal, occasionally pausing to look out the window toward the barn. As darkness fell, Tessa activated the drone's thermal imaging. The farmhouse showed the expected heat signature of a single human occupant. The barn, however, displayed something unusual, a massive heat source that seemed to shift and pulse in a rhythm unlike any known livestock. Then, as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, the barn door opened. Tessa held her breath as a shape emerged, and immediately recognized the distinctive silhouette that had haunted the nightmares of space travelers for 2 centuries. The apex predator moved into the yard, its massive form illuminated by the light spilling from the farmhouse windows. In the flesh, it was even more impressive than the archival footage suggested, nearly 4 meters long from snout to tail, with a muscular body covered in scales that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Its 6 limbs moved with fluid grace, and its elongated head featured sensory appendages that twitched, sampling the air. Every instinct screamed at Tessa to flee, to activate her emergency beacon, to warn the settlement, but professional training kept her frozen in place, documenting what she was witnessing. The farmhouse door opened, and Mara Linton stepped onto the porch. She carried a large bowl in her hands. "There you are," Tessa heard her say through the drone's audio feed. "I was wondering when you'd wake up. Hungry?" To Tessa's astonishment, the apex predator, terror of the spiral arms, destroyer of fleets, made a rumbling sound that could only be described as a purr. It approached the porch with its head lowered, all aggression absent from its posture. Mara set the bowl down and reached out a hand. The predator nuzzled against her palm like an affectionate pet, then began eating from the bowl with delicate precision. "Good girl," Mara said, stroking the creature's head. "Easy now. Plenty more where that came from." Tessa watched in stunned disbelief as the young woman sat on the porch steps beside the predator, casually running her fingers along its scales as it ate. They remained that way for several minutes, the human and the cosmic terror, peaceful in each other's company as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. When the bowl was empty, Mara took it back inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. The predator curled up on the porch, folding its 6 limbs beneath its body and resting its massive head on the wooden planks. Tessa remained in her hiding place, documenting everything, her mind racing to reconcile what she was seeing with everything she knew about the apex predator. After an hour, Mara returned to the porch with a blanket, which she draped over the creature before retreating inside for the night. The predator didn't move from its spot on the porch, apparently content to sleep there under the stars. Dawn found Tessa still at her observation post, having monitored the situation through the night via the drone. The predator had remained peaceful, occasionally shifting position but never leaving the porch. As the sky lightened, Mara emerged from the house, and the morning routine began, a surreal domestic scene featuring the Galaxies' most feared hunter. Tessa knew she should return to her ship, report her findings to the archive, and await further instructions. That would be the protocol. But the contradiction between the official records and what she was witnessing demanded further investigation. Making a decision that she knew might end her career, or worse, Tessa emerged from her hiding place and approached the farmhouse directly. Mara noticed her immediately, pausing in the act of filling another food bowl. The predator's head swiveled toward Tessa, its sensory appendages flaring slightly. "Good morning," Tessa called, maintaining a casual tone despite her pounding heart. "I hope I'm not intruding. I'm Tessa Corin, from the Outer Rim Agricultural Collective. The innkeeper in town suggested I might speak with you about your farming methods." Mara regarded her with a measuring look, one hand resting protectively on the predator's flank. Did she now? She replied, her voice neutral. Well, I'm always happy to talk about sustainable agriculture, though I don't recall the collective sending researchers this far out before. Before Tessa could respond, the predator made a low sound and nudged Mara's hand, as if seeking reassurance. It's all right, Nova, Mara said softly to the creature. Then, to Tessa. She's not used to visitors, but she won't harm you if you don't make any sudden moves. Nova. She had named the apex predator Nova. She's remarkable, Tessa said, genuine awe in her voice. I've never seen anything like her. Mara's expression softened slightly. She is that. Would you like to come inside for tea? Easier to talk there. Tessa accepted, and soon found herself seated at a worn wooden table in the farmhouse kitchen while Mara prepared tea. Through the open door, she could see the predator, Nova, still on the porch, apparently content to bask in the morning sunlight. How long have you had her? Tessa asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Mara set 2 steaming mugs on the table and sat across from Tessa. Almost 2 years now. Found her injured in the hills during a storm. She was just a juvenile then, half-starved and afraid. She blew on her tea thoughtfully. Never intended to keep her? Of course, just wanted to help her heal, but by the time she was strong enough to leave. She shrugged. Well, she decided not to. Tessa sipped her tea, mind racing. And the people in town, what do they think of her? They don't know, Mara said simply. Nova's shy around others, hides when anyone comes around, except you. Apparently, her gaze sharpened. Which makes me wonder why she's so comfortable with your presence, researcher Corin. The emphasis she placed on Tessa's title made it clear that Mara had seen through her cover story. Tessa set down her mug. How did you know? Your posture, your speech patterns, the way you look at everything like you're cataloging it. Mara leaned back in her chair. I grew up on Proxima Centauri. My father was stationed at the research institute there. I recognize an academic when I see one. She nodded toward Nova outside. So what is she? Some kind of endangered species you're tracking? For a moment, Tessa considered maintaining her cover, but something in Mara's direct gaze convinced her that honesty might be the better approach. What do you know about the Regellian fleet incident? She asked. Mara frowned. Not much. Something from history classes. A fleet was destroyed about 2 centuries ago. Some kind of attack. By what the records call the apex predator, Tessa said quietly. A creature that went on to destroy dozens of ships and space stations across 3 spiral arms before disappearing. Mara's eyes widened, and she glanced out at the peaceful form of Nova sunning herself on the porch. You're saying that Nova is this predator? The biometric signature is a 97.8% match, Tessa confirmed. I was sent to verify the reading when our sensors detected it here on Aurelia Prime. For a long moment, Mara was silent, processing this information. Then she shook her head firmly. Whatever happened 200 years ago, that's not Nova. Not anymore. She wouldn't hurt anyone. She's gentle, protective, even. The historical record would strongly disagree, Tessa said gently. Mara stood abruptly. Come with me. She led Tessa out of the kitchen, through a short hallway, and into what appeared to be a small study. There, she activated an old-fashioned computer terminal. After I found Nova, I did some research, she explained. I knew she wasn't a native species, but I couldn't identify her in any of the standard taxonomies, so I compiled my own observations. The screen displayed a series of journal entries, meticulously dated and annotated. Mara scrolled through them, showing Tessa records of Nova's diet, behavior patterns, vocalizations, and physical development over the past 2 years. Look at this, she said, pulling up a more technical file. I took tissue samples when I was treating her injuries. Her cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen. It adapts rapidly to environmental conditions. And her brain activity, she displayed a scan that showed intricate neural patterns. It's comparable to some of the most intelligent known species. Tessa leaned closer, professional fascination temporarily overriding her mission parameters. This is remarkable data. The archive has nothing this comprehensive on the predator's biology, because no one ever tried to understand her, Mara said quietly. They just feared her, outside. Nova made a trilling sound, and Mara immediately looked up. She's hungry again. Come on. Back in the kitchen. Mara prepared another bowl of what appeared to be raw meat mixed with some kind of grain. As she worked, she continued speaking. The first few weeks after I found her, she was so afraid, wouldn't let me near her. I just left food and backed away. Then one night, there was another storm, worse than the one when I found her. She was hiding in the barn, trembling. I sat with her all night, just talking softly. By morning, she let me touch her. Mara smiled at the memory. After that, it was like a wall came down. Every day, she trusted me a little more. She carried the bowl outside, and Tessa followed, watching as Nova eagerly accepted the offering. What does she eat? Tessa asked. Mara looked slightly embarrassed. That might explain some of the rumors in town. She has a particular fondness for goat and chicken. I've been supplementing her diet from neighboring farms. At Tessa's alarmed look, she hastened to add, I leave payment, more than fair value. Just anonymously. You've been stealing livestock to feed her. I prefer to think of it as discreet purchasing, Mara corrected. But yes, she needs protein, a lot of it. Though she's developed quite a taste for my vegetable garden too, which was unexpected. Tessa watched as Nova finished her meal and nuzzled against Mara's hand, seeking affection that was freely given. In all the documented attacks, Tessa said slowly, the predator, Nova, was alone, isolated, possibly hunting for sustenance in the only way she knew how. Mara nodded. She's not malicious. Tessa, she's just different, powerful, and for a long time, very alone. Throughout the day, Tessa observed the interaction between Mara and Nova, documenting everything with her scanner discreetly tucked into her pocket. The more she watched, the more she began to question the archive's classification of the apex predator as an inherently destructive force. Nova helped around the farm in her own way, using her immense strength to pull a plow that would normally require multiple draft animals, clearing fallen trees with her powerful jaws, even herding Mara's small flock of sheep with gentle nudges from her massive head. She started doing that on her own, Mara explained as they watched Nova guide a stray lamb back to the flock. I never trained her. She just observed what needed doing and decided to help. By evening, Tessa had made her decision. Protocol demanded she return to the archive immediately with her findings, but she knew what would happen if she did. The council would dispatch a containment team, or worse, an elimination squad. They wouldn't take the time to understand what she had witnessed. Mara, she said as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset while Nova dozed nearby. I need to be honest with you. My mission parameters require me to report Nova's presence to the Zephyrian archive. When I do, they will likely send others, people who won't be as willing to see beyond the historical record. Mara's hand moved protectively to Nova's flank. Are you going to report us? Tessa took a deep breath. Not yet. First, I want to understand. I want to document everything about your relationship with Nova, how you've managed to form this bond, how she's changed under your care. If I can present comprehensive evidence that she's no longer a threat, there's a chance, a small one, that the archive might reconsider their classification. And if they don't, Then at least I'll have bought you some time to make arrangements. Mara studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, what do you need from us? For the next week, Tessa lived and worked alongside Mara and Nova, gathering data that no researcher had ever been able to collect before. She documented Nova's daily routine, her interactions with Mara, her intelligence tests. She could recognize over 50 distinct symbols and understood complex multi-step instructions, and her peaceful coexistence with the farm's other animals. Most importantly, she recorded hours of footage showing the bond between the young farmer and the creature that had once been the galaxy's most feared predator. The way Nova would curl protectively around Mara during thunderstorms. The gentle games they played together. The apparent communication between them that transcended words. On the 8th day, Tessa's ship AI sent an alert to her portable communicator. The archive was requesting a status update, having received no communication since her arrival on Aurelia Prime. I can't delay any longer, Tessa told Mara that evening. I need to report something, or they'll send a search team. They sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the data Tessa had compiled. Nova rested her massive head on the floor beside Mara's chair, occasionally making soft sounds as if participating in the conversation. What will you tell them? Mara asked. Tessa considered carefully. The truth, but framed in a way that might protect you both. I'll emphasize Nova's changed behavior, the absence of any aggression, the symbiotic relationship you've developed. I'll propose reclassification from hostile entity to sentient companion species. Will they listen? Honestly, I don't know. The archive values data, but it also respects precedent. And the precedent regarding the apex predator is not favorable. Mara reached down to stroke Nova's head. She senses your concern, she said softly. She wants to help. Tessa looked skeptical. How can you tell? We've developed a connection. Not exactly telepathic, but I understand her intentions, her feelings, and she understands mine. Mara hesitated, then added, She remembers. You know, the attacks from before, not clearly. They're like distant dreams to her now, but she remembers being afraid, being hunted. She was defending herself. This revelation startled Tessa. You're saying the Regelian fleet attacked her first? She was very young, younger than when I found her. Something about their engines caused her pain. She lashed out in confusion and fear. Mara's eyes met Tessa's. She's not a monster. Tessa, she never was. Just a frightened creature in a universe that didn't understand her. The next morning, Tessa prepared to return to her ship. She had compiled all her data into a comprehensive report, carefully structured to present the strongest possible case for Nova's reclassification. I'll transmit this directly to the Archival Council, she told Mara, then I'll return here to await their response. With luck, they'll require additional verification before making any decisions. Mara nodded, but her expression remained worried. And if they don't? If they send others immediately? Then I'll warn you. Tessa promised. You'll have time to leave, to find somewhere safe. Nova had been watching their exchange with apparent understanding. Now she rose from her spot by the hearth and approached Tessa, lowering her massive head to eye level. Tessa remained perfectly still as the creature regarded her with intelligent eyes that seemed to hold depths she was only beginning to comprehend. Then, to her astonishment, Nova gently pressed her forehead against Tessa's shoulder, a gesture of trust that brought unexpected tears to the researcher's eyes. She's thanking you, Mara said softly. She understands what you're trying to do. The journey back to the Empirical gave Tessa time to reflect on everything she had witnessed and everything she was about to do. Her report would directly contradict 2 centuries of established classification. She was risking her career, possibly even criminal charges for failing to immediately report a Class 1 threat. But she couldn't unsee what she had seen. The galaxy's most feared predator. dozing peacefully beside a human who had shown it nothing but kindness. "Transmission ready," the ship's AI announced once Tessa had uploaded her data. "Channel to Zephyrian Archive open." Tessa took a deep breath. "Send." For 3 days, there was no response from the archive. Tessa remained aboard the Empirical, monitoring communications and preparing additional documentation to support her case. On the morning of the 4th day, the ship's proximity alarm sounded. "Multiple vessels entering the Aurelian system," the AI reported. "Configuration matches Zephyrian Archive Enforcement Division." Tessa's heart sank. She had hoped for more time, for at least a chance to defend her findings before the Council took action. "How many ships?" she asked. 3. 2 Raptor-class interceptors and 1 Dreadnought-class command vessel. A containment fleet. The Archive had dispatched enough firepower to subdue a small rebellion. Time to planetary intercept? Approximately 4 hours at current velocity. Tessa didn't hesitate. "Prepare for immediate launch, and open a secure channel to the farmhouse emergency communicator I left with Mara Linton." Within minutes, she was airborne, pushing the Empirical to its maximum atmospheric speed as she raced toward Haven's Valley. The ship's sensors detected activity at the Linton farm, movement, heat signatures indicating rapid activity. Good. Mara had received her warning. Tessa set the ship down directly in the farmyard, not bothering with stealth protocols now. As the hatch opened, she saw Mara emerging from the barn, carrying what appeared to be hastily packed bags. "Archive vessels will reach planetary orbit in less than 4 hours," Tessa explained as she helped load the bags into the Empirical's small cargo hold. "Where's Nova?" "Still inside," Mara replied, her face tight with worry. "She's agitated, sensing something's wrong." "We need to hurry. The Enforcement Division won't waste time with observations or interviews. They'll target the biometric signature directly." Together they entered the barn, where Nova paced restlessly, her powerful limbs tense, sensory appendages fully extended. "It's all right, girl," Mara soothed, approaching the creature with practiced calm. "We need to leave now. Remember how we practiced? Like our night walks, but longer." To Tessa's amazement, Nova seemed to understand. She lowered herself to the ground, allowing Mara to secure a simple harness around her massive torso, not to restrain her. Tessa realized, but to allow her to carry additional supplies. "Will she fit in the ship?" Tessa asked doubtfully, eyeing Nova's considerable bulk. "If we clear out the secondary cabin, yes. She can compress herself when needed. Another adaptation I've documented." Within the hour, they were ready. The Empirical had been reconfigured, non-essential equipment stored or jettisoned to make room for Nova. The creature had indeed compressed her body, folding her 6 limbs close and retracting her sensory appendages in a way that reduced her volume by nearly 40%. "Where can we go?" Mara asked as they prepared for takeoff. "The Archive has resources throughout the galaxy. They'll track Nova's biometric signature wherever we run." Tessa had been considering this problem. "Not necessarily. Your research showed that Nova's cellular structure adapts to her environment. If we could find a way to mask or alter her signature somehow." Mara's eyes widened. "The Cygnus Nebula. My father once mentioned research there, something about natural radiation that affects biometric readings. It's why they could never establish permanent monitoring stations." "The Cygnus Nebula is half a galaxy away," Tessa pointed out. "But if we could reach it, we might be able to hide long enough to find a more permanent solution." It was a desperate plan, but better than none. Tessa engaged the Empirical's engines, and the ship rose swiftly into the Aurelian sky. "We'll need to outrun the Archive vessels," she explained as they ascended. "Once we clear the system, we can plot a course that—" The ship's proximity alarm blared again. "Warning," the AI announced. "Archive vessels have altered course. Estimated intercept in 27 minutes. "They must have detected our launch," Tessa muttered. increasing speed to maximum. The Empirical shuddered as its engines pushed beyond recommended parameters. In the converted cargo area, Nova made a low, anxious sound. "It's all right," Mara called to her. "We're going to be fine." But Tessa's instruments told a different story. The archive vessels were gaining, their military-grade engines easily outpacing the research ship's overtaxed propulsion system. "We won't clear the system before they intercept," Tessa admitted grimly. "And once they're in range, their tractor beams will lock on to us." Mara's face was pale but determined. "What options do we have?" Tessa studied the navigational display, searching for anything that might give them an advantage. Her eye caught on an anomaly near the system's edge. "There," she said, pointing. "An asteroid field with unusual mineral composition. It might interfere with their targeting systems long enough for us to slip past and make the jump to superluminal travel. Is it dangerous? Less dangerous than what's behind us." Tessa altered course, guiding the ship toward the distant cluster of asteroids. The massive rocks loomed larger in the view screen, jagged, irregular shapes tumbling slowly through the void. "Warning," the AI intoned. "Archive vessels are charging weapon systems." A sudden flash illuminated the cockpit as energy weapons discharged behind them, a warning shot that passed close enough to make the Empirical's shields flare briefly. "They're ordering us to heave to," Tessa reported, reading the incoming transmission. "Standard procedure before escalating to disabling shots." In the cargo area, Nova had risen to her feet, her massive body tense. A low, rumbling sound emerged from her throat, not the contented purr Tessa had documented on the farm, but something more primal. "She senses the danger," Mara said quietly. "She wants to protect us." Tessa shook her head firmly. "No. If she reveals her true capabilities now, it will only confirm everything the Archive believes about her. Our only chance is to reach that asteroid field." The distance closed agonizingly slowly. Behind them, the Archive vessels continued their pursuit, firing occasional warning shots that came increasingly close to the Empirical's shields. "Asteroid field perimeter in 2 minutes," the AI announced. "Weapons lock detected," it added a moment later. "Impact imminent." Tessa braced for the hit, a disabling shot aimed at their engines. But instead, the entire ship lurched violently as a tractor beam seized them. "We're caught," Tessa said grimly. "They'll board us as soon as they reel us in." In the cargo area, Nova's rumbling had intensified. The sound vibrated through the ship's hull, raising the hair on Tessa's arms. "Mara," she said urgently, "you need to calm her. If she attacks the boarding party, they'll have no choice but to—" She was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The view screen flickered, then displayed the stern face of Chief Archivist Ven. "Researcher Corin," he said, his voice as coldly precise as ever. "You have violated multiple protocols and endangered yourself and others through your unauthorized actions. Power down your vessel immediately and prepare to be boarded." Tessa met his gaze steadily. "Chief Archivist, I've submitted comprehensive documentation demonstrating that the entity classified as the apex predator is no longer a threat. If you would just review—" "Your report has been noted," Ven interrupted. "However, 2 centuries of established classification cannot be overturned by a single researcher's observations. However thorough, the entity must be contained and studied under controlled conditions." "You mean imprisoned?" Mara interjected, moving into view of the transmission. "Experimented on. You don't want to understand her. You want to use her." The Chief Archivist's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "The safety of galactic civilization takes precedence over the comfort of a single organism. Ms. Linton, the apex predator will be treated humanely, but it must be contained," as if understanding his words. Nova's rumbling grew louder. The ship trembled with the force of it. "Please," Tessa tried again, "just allow us to present our case to the full council. Review all the evidence before taking action. The Council has reviewed your initial report and found it insufficient to warrant reclassification. Ven replied. The containment team will board your vessel in approximately 5 minutes. I suggest you secure the entity to prevent any unfortunate incidents. The transmission ended, leaving Tessa and Mara staring at each other in desperation. They won't listen, Mara said softly. They've already decided. Nova moved forward, pressing her massive head against Mara's side in what seemed like a gesture of comfort. Despite everything, Tessa felt a surge of wonder at the bond between them, a connection that defied everything the archive had ever documented about the apex predator. An idea began to form in Tessa's mind, desperate, perhaps even foolish, but possibly their only chance. The boarding party, she said slowly. They'll be expecting resistance. They'll come prepared to subdue a hostile entity. Mara nodded, stroking Nova's head. But what if they found something else entirely? The plan came together quickly. When the archive containment team forced open the Empirical's hatch 7 minutes later, they entered with weapons drawn and tranquilizer systems ready, prepared for the fight of their lives against the Galaxy's most feared predator. Instead, they found Tessa and Mara sitting calmly in the ship's main cabin. And beside them, curled peacefully on the floor, was Nova, not raging or threatening, but watching the intruders with intelligent eyes that held no aggression. Welcome, gentlemen, Tessa said formally. As you can see, we've been expecting you. The containment team hesitated, clearly disconcerted by the scene before them. Their leader, a grim-faced woman in the formal gray of the Archive Enforcement Division, stepped forward cautiously. Researcher Corin, she acknowledged. We have orders to take the entity into custody. Of course, Tessa replied. But first, might I suggest a demonstration, something that might be relevant to your mission parameters? Without waiting for a response, she turned to Mara, who nodded and addressed Nova directly. Nova, she said clearly, would you show our visitors how you help with the harvest? To the astonishment of the containment team, the massive creature rose gracefully and moved to a crate that had been placed in the center of the cabin. With delicate precision, her massive jaws lifted a single piece of fruit from the crate and placed it gently in Mara's outstretched hand. Again, Mara instructed, select the ripe ones, just like at home. Nova proceeded to sort through the fruit, carefully selecting only those that showed the proper coloration and placing them one by one into a separate container. Her movements were measured, controlled, and unmistakably intelligent. The containment team leader watched in silent amazement. When Nova had finished the task, the leader activated her communication device. Chief Archivist, she reported, we have an unexpected situation. Request immediate visual transmission. Minutes later, Ven's face appeared on the main view screen. His usual impassive expression faltered momentarily as he took in the scene, particularly Nova, now curled peacefully at Mara's feet once more. Explain, he demanded. Tessa stepped forward. Chief Archivist, what you're witnessing is exactly what I documented in my report. The entity known as the apex predator, Nova, has formed a symbiotic bond with Ms. Linton. She's not a mindless destroyer. She's a sentient being capable of complex thought, emotional attachment, and peaceful coexistence. A few tricks prove nothing, Ven replied, though with less certainty than before. Then perhaps this will, Mara said. She turned to Nova and made a series of hand gestures, a simple sign language they had developed. Nova responded immediately, moving to the ship's computer terminal, using one delicate claw. She activated the system and navigated through several screens to pull up Tessa's research data. The containment team murmured in astonishment. Even Ven seemed momentarily speechless. She understands abstract concepts, Tessa explained. She recognizes symbols, comprehends causality, demonstrates emotional intelligence. Everything I documented in my report is true. Chief Archivist. She's not the same creature that attacked the Regellian fleet 2 centuries ago. For a long moment, Ven was silent, his gaze fixed on Nova. Finally, he spoke. Commander Laren, he addressed the containment team leader. Hold your position. Do not attempt to seize the entity. I will consult with the full council. The transmission ended, leaving an uncertain silence in its wake. Did it work? Mara whispered to Tessa. I don't know, Tessa admitted. But at least they're reconsidering. For the next 6 hours, they remained in a tense standoff. The containment team maintained positions throughout the ship, but made no move against Nova. The creature herself seemed to understand the delicacy of the situation, remaining calm and responsive to Mara's instructions. Finally, the view screen activated once more. This time, it displayed not just Ven, but the entire archival council, 12 solemn figures in formal gray. After reviewing all available evidence, Ven announced, and in light of the unprecedented demonstration we have witnessed, the council has reached a decision. Tessa held her breath. Beside her, Mara gripped Nova's harness tightly. The entity classified as the apex predator will be provisionally reclassified as sentient companion species Nova Variant. This reclassification is conditional upon continued peaceful behavior and regular monitoring. Relief flooded through Tessa, but Ven wasn't finished. However, he continued, given the historical significance of this case, the Council requires additional data. Researcher Corin, you will continue your documentation of the entity and its interactions with Ms. Linton. You will submit monthly reports directly to the Council, and you will allow periodic inspections by archive representatives. It wasn't perfect, but it was far better than they had dared hope. Tessa nodded her agreement. One more condition, Ven added. The entity, Nova, must remain on Aurelia Prime, where her activities can be properly monitored. Any attempt to leave the planet will result in immediate reinstatement of the original classification and appropriate containment measures. Mara exchanged a glance with Tessa, then looked down at Nova, who gazed back at her with what could only be described as trust. We accept your conditions, Mara said. 1 year later, Tessa stood on the porch of the Linton farmhouse, watching as Nova and Mara worked together in the fields. The sight still filled her with wonder, the massive creature moving with surprising grace among the crops. Her powerful limbs now turned to nurturing rather than destroying. The past 12 months had brought significant changes. The archive had established a small research outpost near Havens Valley, staffed by scientists who had initially come with suspicion but now showed genuine fascination with Nova's capabilities. The settlement itself had gradually been introduced to their unusual neighbor, fear giving way to cautious acceptance and eventually even pride in their unique status. Tessa's monthly reports to the Council had grown into a comprehensive study of Nova's biology, psychology, and social development. The data had already led to revisions in the archive's classification systems, with a new emphasis on adaptive behavior and the potential for rehabilitation even among species previously deemed inherently dangerous. Most importantly, the case had established what many were now calling the companionship override. The recognition that empathy, care, and consistent positive interaction could fundamentally alter behavioral patterns, even in the most feared entities. Quite a change from when you first arrived, isn't it? Remarked Dr. Eleanor Chen, the archive's senior xenobiologist, who had joined the research team 6 months ago. Tessa nodded, smiling as she watched Nova gently herd a flock of sheep with careful movements of her massive head. From terror of the spiral arms to farm helper, not the career path I expected to document. The Council is considering applying similar approaches to other classified threats. Eleanor mentioned, your work here has sparked quite the paradigm shift. In the field, Mara called out to Nova, who immediately responded, bounding over with an eagerness that belied her fearsome appearance. As Tessa watched them together, the young farmer and the creature that had once destroyed fleets. She reflected on how profoundly one simple truth had changed everything, that even the most dangerous entity in the galaxy might just need a home, routine care, and someone who saw beyond the fear to the being beneath. That evening, as the sun set over Aurelia Prime, Tessa added a final note to her latest report. Today marks 1 year since the provisional reclassification of the entity formerly known as the Apex Predator. In that time, Nova has displayed no aggressive behavior toward any sentient species. She continues to form social bonds with both her primary caregiver and, increasingly, other members of the Havens Valley community. Most notably, 3 local children have now been permitted by their parents to interact with Nova under supervision, and she has shown particular gentleness in their presence. Where once we saw only a cosmic terror, we now recognize a complex, intelligent being capable of forming deep emotional connections. I therefore formally request that the Council remove the provisional status from Nova's reclassification and acknowledge what has become abundantly clear, that understanding, compassion, and patience can transform even the most feared predator into a valued companion. In closing, I propose a new axiom for inclusion in archive protocols. No entity, no matter how dangerous its history, should be deemed beyond redemption without first attempting the companionship protocol. Tessa sent the report, then joined Mara and Nova on the porch, where they sat peacefully watching the stars emerge, the same stars that had once trembled at the Apex Predator's approach, now shining down on a creature who slept at a human's bed and ate gently from her hand.